Hi everyone. Welcome to this wonderful live that we're going to have today. It's a real honor to be hosting Eniola Aluko for a chat, and we're going to be talking about some of the hidden barriers for Black women as coaches and in positions, executive positions in football. So today is a part of our Black Coaches Matter campaign in partnership with FAIR. So we're really excited to be hearing from Annie and hearing a little bit about her experience and some of the takeaways that we can get from her experiences and in this space of looking for find ways to change some of the unconscious bias and the ingrained social norms that exist. Just to introduce Annie before we invite her on, I mean, she needs no introduction. She's a player with a long and admirable career and now off the field as well. She played for many clubs, from Chelsea to Juventus, and made over 102 appearances for England, including in 3 different World Cups, I believe. She's a UK solicitor and a commentator as well. She was the first female pundit on Match of the Day, which is another trailblazing, amazing achievement. And currently she's sporting director at Aston Villa Women. So a very diverse, exciting range of experiences. I think we can learn a lot from her today. So hopefully everybody enjoys this conversation. And I'm going to invite her on so we can get started.
Hello,
Hi, Annie. How are you? Can you hear me?
I can hear you. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good, thanks. And you?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm
Yeah,
comfortably on
thank
my
you so
sofa.
much. Sorry?
I said I'm sat very comfortably on my sofa, so
Perfect. Thank you for making some time to join us. It's a real pleasure to have you chatting with Girls United, and especially as part of this initiative. I think it's going to be a great conversation. We had the luck of chatting a little bit beforehand about some of the things we want to discuss today, and I think there's going to be some amazing kind of different takeaways and different exploration around this topic of diversity and inclusion, but going a little bit further into what that really means and what changes really need to happen now. Very excited. I think, as we mentioned to you the other day, Girls United is an organization that mainly focuses on supporting women and girls to feel empowered on the pitch and also off the pitch. Through our methodology, we look to give them life skills, but I think the intersection between race and gender is so important. So hopefully that's something that we can explore today. So thank you for being here. Hopefully we'll get through a few different things. But just to start, I mean, I'd love to hear a little bit from you about why you decided to continue your career from being on the pitch into sort of the director of sport at Aston Villa. What was sort of the process there for you?
well, I love football. Fundamentally, I love football. I've done it since I was 5 years old. Um, so when I made the very difficult decision to retire,
Mm,
that took a little bit of a while to decide actually whether I was going to continue playing football or not. And then it was like, well, what am I going to do? Uh, and I just finished my master's at UEFA actually, to become a sporting director. So I already knew I was going to go down that path of sort of executive, in an executive role. I knew I wasn't really going to go into coaching and become a manager or a coach, but I knew I wanted to stay in the game. And so, I wanted to educate myself in that area, understand what the job was all about, hear from other people who are also sporting directors as well. And also, because I have a legal background, I think it lends quite well to
of
the
course.
administrative side of the game. So that was kind of the reasoning behind being in the role I'm in now. But the actual role was, it's not something I applied for. It kind of came out of the blue. I was pretty much recruited by the owner of Aston Villa, who recognized that I was local to Birmingham, and also I have obviously lots of experience playing, but also I've got that legal background and got that education as well. So it kind of was a matter of timing, but also
Sure.
a little bit of a surprise too. So I took the opportunity and just, went into it. And 9 months later now, I'm still kind of learning on the job. I didn't expect to be doing the job in COVID times.
Of course, yeah. Curveball straight away, right? It's
Yeah, total curveball. But I've learned a lot as a result of, just working in this job in such an unprecedented time.
of course, yeah. That's super interesting. I mean, such a testament to your whole career and your journey to kind of fall into this role and have be invited to it. I mean, that's super exciting that you were able to kind of find that pathway. How has it been? Has it been in terms of the shift and in terms of the skills that you need in order to succeed in the role? And have you found that the playing career, I mean, as you said, I imagine the law career has a lot of benefits and a lot of transferable things. What about in terms of playing? Have you found that that's something that has transferred over?
Yeah, I've actually really enjoyed the actual job, how multifaceted it is and multidisciplinary. I really enjoy the variation of it. Um, it's every day can be different. So one day I could be on a call speaking to a player, trying to recruit a player. Another day I'm dealing with COVID protocols. Another day I'm doing a contract for, a player or a staff member. Another day we're talking tactics with this. It's
Sure.
very, very varied. Another day I'm doing budgets. So I quite enjoy that side of it. I think for me, obviously, it's been difficult in terms of just the transition from being a player to now being, a leader for Aston Villa women. It's my first role in leadership, so there's a lot I've had to learn very quickly in just how to manage people and how to manage expectations and strategies and all those kind of things. But it's definitely something I know has already grown me a lot as in this role, but also as a person. So I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying it, the challenge of it. Obviously, the season has started now, and you always want to get good results on the pitch. So that bit's been difficult in the sense that I'm not on the field. I'm not.
Right. Having to.
I can't really affect it. Um,
Sure.
my job was kind of, in terms of on the pitch, was kind of ended when we recruited players and but that's been the difficult part. Sometimes I just want to get out there and play. But ultimately it's been really, it's a job that's really shaped me and pushed me and challenged me in many different ways. So I'm grateful for that.
That's super exciting. I mean, I think, we speak a lot about within the Girls United clubs about how we can develop those skills that on the pitch and how it has to be intentional, right? Like it's not necessarily something that just by playing football you speak about, but if we do make it intentional and make these environments spaces where those skills can be explored, then hopefully it's experiences that then translate into any sphere of work. But
Yeah.
that's super exciting. I guess it'd be interesting to hear as you've been sort of trailblazing through your career into roles where potentially it hasn't been you've maybe been the first woman in a role or first black woman, and to experience all these things without having necessarily a lot of visibility of role models. How is that? What has driven you to be able to succeed in spite of being maybe a little bit different or having to kind of face those challenges?
Yeah, I think from a young age I've always been a little bit of the odd one out. So I've always been kind of happy. When I was growing up, I was the only girl playing with the boys and excelled and loved it and was accepted as the odd one out. Um, and I suppose as I've grown up, I've realized that being the first or being the odd one out is not a negative thing. It's an opportunity to open the door for other people that look like you, for other girls, for other black women. So I've actually sort of embraced the idea of being the first or being you know, being the first black woman or being the first woman in whatever field I've been in, whether it's media, whether it's, you know, sporting director, whether it's, you know, whatever that may be. I think the challenge comes from understanding that you will have uh, adversity when you get into those roles. It's just,
Sure.
and because, you know, people are conditioned to people aren't, a lot of people aren't conditioned to accept what's different or
Mm.
accept change or accept something they've never seen before. The first response is negative.
Mm.
So that's when it gets quite lonely. That's when it can get quite difficult. But I always just remind myself of what, you know, the intention and why I'm doing something. So if me being a sporting director now is going to encourage, you know, the next generation of black girls coming up in Birmingham, I've done my job. That's enough motivation for me to continue, you know, doing what I'm doing. Obviously you have to enjoy it as well, which is what I've explained. I do enjoy the job, but it's a lot deeper than that for me. I think it's about saying, actually, if it's not me trying to break down a barrier and trying to shift stereotypes, it has to be somebody else. We can't leave, we have to take space. Do you
Mm.
know what I mean? We can't just leave spaces that aren't diverse and say, oh, well, that's just the way it is. Somebody has to shift that status quo.
Mm.
And
Amazing.
so
Yeah.
I'm happy to try and do that, with all the, you know, pardon my language, the bullshit that often comes with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. I mean, I guess there's almost like an intrinsic motivation from that impact that's going to happen, and it's very personal, right? In a sense, it's very internal. So yeah, that's wonderful. I mean, I think if we all find that in our own environments, then
And having a support system, do you know what I mean? Having a support system of people that know who you are, um, and understand who you are beyond your job and beyond work, it gets you through because, like I said, it can be difficult, it can be frustrating, um, and you know, there's a lot of stereotypes around women in roles, and there's a lot of definitely lots of stereotypes around black women, but it's making sure that actually you you know who you are to your core, so that those things don't really shake you as much as they can do.
of course, yeah. So I think there's some really interesting points to talk about in terms of how we, what those challenges are, as you mentioned, kind of the more ingrained side. But just before we get to that, I'd love to ask you, because we're speaking a little bit in the context of coaches, if there's been sort of coaches that have shaped you in your career that you find have really kind of been a part of who you are now, whether that's positively or negatively, or just in terms of the ones that stick in your mind.
Yeah, so I've been fortunate to have quite a few good coaches, who from young up until sort of the end of my career. My first coach was a guy called Marcus Bignot.
Okay.
He, you know, he was a professional footballer at the time, but he sort of took me on at Birmingham, and because he was a footballer who was playing at quite a high level, well, I think he was playing in the Premier League at the time or the Championship. We all kind of, it was like, wow, you know, we all sort of looked up to him, and
Sure.
he he taught me sort of the fundamental basics of being a good footballer.
Hmm.
You know, how to shield the ball, how to protect the ball, how to work for your team. And you know, I definitely remember a lot of the tips that he gave me. Um, and I think the coach that stands out the most is Emma Hayes at Chelsea,
Hmm.
who was a female leader. I think I learnt so much from her. She was fearless in her approach in terms of leadership. Um, she understood how to really kick doors down to get her vision implemented. The Chelsea women that you see now was not the Chelsea women you see 6 years ago. No one cared. There was, you know, we barely had water bottles, but it was her vision and her ability to just be unapologetic about women's football and elite standards and high standards for professional female athletes that that has created what day. And whether it was managing upwards, learning how to manage the people above her, the people with the money, frankly, that implement all of those changes, or whether it's managing her team around her, whether it's making sure that players, every single player from all ends of the globe, feel accepted and loved in that team. It's only now that I'm in a leadership role that I realize how much I learned from her. So and then there's obviously the terrible coaches that I'll be kind enough not to name them, but you learn how not to do it,
Sure.
frankly. And I think one of the risks in coaching is that you surround yourself with people that look like you, talk like you, think like you, and then you end up creating a herd of sheep that all think the same, and you isolate people who are individuals. And that's never a nice environment to be in, particularly in a football environment where it's such a universal sport.
Of
Uh,
course.
so there's lots I've learned throughout my career from coaches, that I'm using now in my position, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's super interesting that you kind of highlight on that kind of creation of environments where people can succeed, and again, sort of, that I think that's one of the important challenges, right? Is how we step away from environments where people are hiring and
Mm.
recruiting people that look the same. Obviously diversity in a football environment is so enriching, and in every environment is so enriching that how we look at that is so important. I think, I mean, it'd be great to hear a little bit how that how that has felt now in your current role. Like, do you feel you're being able to have an impact in that process of diversifying the club, and is that something that more clubs can be doing?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question because I think it's something that, with the best intentions, definitely I want to do. I think, again, going back to just me being in the role in of itself has has diversified,
Of
uh,
course.
what people usually see.
Mm-hmm.
But there needs to be more, for sure. Certainly one of the things that I really want to do at Aston Villa is really engage with the community, in a way that means that they're exposed to our environment, which means that if somebody wants to become a sports scientist, a sporting director, a coach, a player, whatever that may be, they've seen it. Like, they've seen what it actually means. Um, so real engagement with the community is really actually bringing them in, and so whether it's students, the student community in Birmingham, whether it's young girls, it's being able to bring them in and actually have them see our environment for what it is. It might be a little bit difficult in this COVID time, but it's definitely something that I have at top of mind. Um, and just be that voice for the game in terms of making sure people are recruiting much wider than where they usually recruit. You know, um, I've been fortunate in this job already to speak to players from all over the world. Um, and that's what you should be doing. You shouldn't be recruiting from the same pond of people.
Of course.
Um, so it's something you always have to be conscious about. Um, and there's also diversity of thought. I think one of the things that I've learned as a female leader is that we've got to be really careful as women not to exclude men in the conversation. There's a lot of men that are actually, you know, big, big empowerers of women. And actually, there's a lot of women that often get in the way of other women. So there's an equilibrium that is really important. I think that is really healthy to have in a sports environment. Going back to the Chelsea example, Emma Hayes is, I think has found a really good balance between having male staff and women's staff. So it's also diversity of thought. You know, a man is gonna maybe a man may think something completely different to a woman, but the way they think could actually make an optimal decision. If you have too many women, it goes the other way. If you have too many men, it goes another way. So actually having an equilibrium is really healthy. I think sometimes we get lost in our sort of bid to be, you know, female, female, female. As a female leader, it's also just about creating good teams that make good decisions, you know?
Absolutely. No, that's wonderful. I think that's super important to keep in mind in this whole kind of, especially now as movements start to build and build, it's how do we change those, you know, those the way that we look at each other, more on a root level and more on a base level than just, you know, really looking beyond gender and beyond race and seeing everybody as equals and therefore creating that equilibrium, as you say. It's super
Yeah.
important. So I mean, it'd be great to hear a bit about what does it feel like being in a role that's typically held by white men as a black woman, and what have you been faced with in that space?
Um, how does it feel? I mean, it feels exciting. It feels like a great opportunity. As I said, my approach, you know, a lot of people talk about imposter syndrome. Is
Hmm.
that, you know, you kind of feel out of sorts. You don't feel worthy of a position. I think it's rubbish. I think you've got to, you know, you got to, it's not, sorry, it's not rubbish because it's a genuine emotion and it's actually something people go through. But what I'm saying is that it's something that you have to sort of train yourself and tell yourself, no, I'm qualified enough for this role. I'm good enough for this role. Yes, I'm not going to be perfect. Yes, there's going to be lots of things I need to learn, but I've earned this. I'm going to be all right. And I think women often are so hard on themselves. I'm hard on myself, but women in particular, we're often the most qualified, but we don't tell ourselves that we are. Whereas
Hmm.
men will fake it until they make it. A man,
Sure.
you know, less qualified, but he's like, no, I can do that. I think that's what we need to, you know, and I have learned how to do that. I've learned how to tell myself, do you know what, actually, I've worked really hard and I've qualified in this and I'm good in this and I can do that. And okay, if I don't know this, I'll go and learn it. Um, so in terms of being like in the role, a role that's, you know, never existed before in at the club, it's something I see as an opportunity, and I want to encourage other players to do the same. Um, in terms of like again being a black woman, I think it's also about saying, as I said earlier, like I know that there are certain stereotypes associated with black women, particularly black women in leadership. Those typically are, you know, rude or angry or aggressive or um, diva. There's these kind of stereotypes that tend to be associated with black women. Because I know that, um, it's often trying to do not do the opposite, but it's also trying to kind of again break those stereotypical views. Um, and just trying to build relationships that allow people to see you rather than see the stereotype, if that makes any sense.
Of course, yeah.
um it's hard, but it's something that I think once you're conscious of it, you know how to navigate it. Because people then go, oh, actually I thought this and it's completely different reality. um but you know, ultimately I think there will always be a certain expectation that comes with race or gender, that often you have to just, you know, you have to just rise above it.
Yeah. Of course.
Unfortunately, no, we can't change. We, you know, often racism and sexism is in the minds of people, that it's been entrenched for a long time, and you can only do so much before you just say, do you know what, actually I can't change you. I have to do me and allow you to adjust.
Hmm. That's wonderful. That's wonderful. I mean, I think, we see it in our girls. We work in some contexts in rural areas of Mexico, which is where I'm from. We see sometimes those mindsets starting to shift just by example, as you said, by the girls being who they are, going out on the pitch, doing their thing. And then, those people who maybe before were in disbelief or had certain mentalities, just by observing and by seeing it start to shift. I think that kind of leads to a very important kind of conversation around what those entrenched mindsets are, and how addressing these issues goes way beyond just a movement on social media. It has to go a little bit more in depth into how do we educate people differently, and
Yeah,
how.
yeah. I think that all of us have unconscious bias,
Mhm.
like all of us do.
Sure.
Um, and obviously it's more pronounced when it comes to race. Um, so I generally feel like unconscious bias training needs to be something that's more widely done,
Mhm.
so that you're aware of what your bias is. You're aware of, like, if someone walks into the room and you instinctively judge them based on how they look or where they're from or how they talk, um, that's a problem.
Sure.
But the minute that's held up to you, you're able to then adjust and say, actually, no, like, delete that thought, take that person for what they are. Um, so I genuinely think, like, unconscious bias training, diversity training needs to be something that's like widely done. Because without it, I think we're relying on people to just internally look at themselves when they don't. Sometimes some people don't know that they're being racist or sexist.
Mm.
They don't even realize they're doing it because
Right.
they've learned it from their parents, and their parents have learned it from their parents. Um, so I think these are the things that I think have to come into the workplace more often. And I think this year, 2020, that's what's happening, with the Black Lives Matter movement, with things like what you're doing at Girls United FA, and um, coaches like you're bringing it to the surface all of the time. So people are able to watch and look at themselves and go, actually, do I think like that? Maybe I think, and so there's a lot of companies now, there's a lot of organizations, there's a lot of teams, there's a lot of awareness now for people to just be able to have a look at themselves and say, am I contributing to this problem of racism and sexism and whatever it may be? Like, am I doing my part? I think that's one of the things that's been amazing about 2020, that I've had so many conversations with, people who are not of color, who have actually said, you know what, actually, it's not enough to just say, well, I'm not racist, or I'm not this or that. I actually actively have to, make sure that it's an anti-racist organization or anti-racist environment. So, there's a lot that we need to do, but I think the wheels are in motion, slowly.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I mean, I think that's really great. As I guess a takeaway for everyone, right, is just have a little think about yourself and
Yeah.
about. Yeah, and as you said, we all have them in some shape or form,
Hmm.
and it's a case of recognizing that so that we can challenge ourselves. So that's really wonderful. I mean, do you think that these kinds of programs or these kinds of initiatives, is whose responsibility is it for this to be kind of addressed continuously, and for this movement to kind of continue to grow? Do you think it's something that at a club level, federations, or just on a fan level? I think it seems like nowadays a lot of the anti-racism and equality campaigns are geared at individuals, but how do we, is that enough? Um,
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's throughout the whole football pyramid. So it obviously starts from very young. So hopefully our next generation of are already doing a lot of sort of inward looking unconscious bias, a lot of education around Black history, a lot of education around women, like, so that the next generation won't be having this discussion.
Sure.
Um, I think then when it comes into the professional game, well, before that, talking about coaches, I think there should be mandatory unconscious bias recruitment strategies training for coaches. That should be part of your coaching course.
Wonderful.
And then in the professional game, when you get into the professional game, then it's about saying, how are you making sure that you're constantly reviewing those practices? Because, I've realized that when you get into, when you work for football clubs and when you get into these roles, you become creatures of habit. People just do what they've always done
Sure.
and just and just churn out what they've always churned out. But you never really evolve like that. So it takes you to constantly review and top up, and make sure that you're staying on top of your own biases and recruitment strategies, so that you are constantly making sure you're diversifying. I think it goes throughout the pyramid, but it starts young. I think
Sure.
starts
Yeah.
from.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I guess it's as you said, hopefully these conversations have an impact on next generations and how that conversation starts to shift. And I think we in the space of gender equality, we speak a lot about how it is something that needs to be educated from a young age for that to really
The good
kind of.
comment says, Tilly Robinson says, I think there needs to be change higher up. We need more women in powerful roles that have usually been dominated by men. Totally agree. I think again that really important. But I also think that sometimes one woman in a room of 10 men around a boardroom may not change much. Um, it's being able to say, can we have 3 out of 10 versus 1 out of 10? Can we start to incrementally grow that level of diversity? Because there's also the risk that, you know, people can be tokens or tick boxes,
Hmm.
and actually the practical, do they have a voice? You can be sat there without a voice.
Hmm.
I've been in lots of meetings where I've been like, can I actually contribute in this? They're like, and I'm not talking about in this role in particular, because obviously once you're in a leadership role, you're able to infect it a lot more. But I've spoken to people who, yes, they're at the table, but it's having a voice at the table too, you
Yeah,
know. So
100%.
it's just that, because I think that's where a lot of companies think, oh, we've done our job, we've got one woman. But it's like, yeah, okay, but what does she do? Do you respect her voice? Do you? So there's that as well. There's a lot, but we're moving in the right direction.
Yeah, no, and I think unpiecing it is really useful to kind of understand the issue and be able to address it better. I mean, this that you're mentioning, I think really speaks about, I think one of the things we spoke about going into the live is those hidden barriers and those the maybe underlying pressures that they don't teach us about, or they don't teach women and people about when they're in those roles, and being able to have a voice in a boardroom full of men who maybe won't give it to you just because they respect you in the same way is 100% one of those hidden barriers. So
Yeah,
tell us
I
about your
think
experience.
you're right in describing it as a hidden barrier. I think there's a risk that just being there, people think that's enough. No, you got to be able to speak and shape, influence, and change. That's when change starts to one of my good friends is on the, she's just said, Michelle Moore, one of my, she said, representation with no power doesn't work. That is exactly what I'm saying. It can look good, but if there's no voice at the table, it's even more damaging.
Hmm.
So that's also super important.
Yeah. Yeah. How do you, what would you say in terms of preparing, coaches, female coaches, and young women who strive to these roles and strive to be in those positions in order for them to be able to to have that voice and I mean I obviously it's hopefully it's not only their responsibility, it shouldn't be their responsibility, but if we are in these spaces, how can we prepare better for that.
How can we prepare better? I think now there's a lot of networks that um, allow women to feel more confident when they get into those positions of influence and power. Um, I think the support system now of women in sport, of black networks, of mentors, other people who've been in that position, is a lot stronger than it certainly has been in the past.
Sure.
I'm a firm believer that you won't really learn how to swim until you're chucked into the water. Like, you can go on all of these courses and do all of these things to prepare, but the real preparation is in the job. I said earlier, I did a two-year master's as a sporting director, and it was a great course, but there was no coronavirus module.
Of course. Yeah.
I had to figure it out on the job.
Mhm. Yeah.
Great, because you'll make mistakes, but you're learning on the job, and you're swimming, and you're just, it's like when you chuck a baby in the water and they just figure it out. They learn how to swim. And a lot of the time we have the answers within us when it's experiential. It's not necessarily something that you can always learn on a course. So I would say putting yourself in the position is probably the best learning you can have, but
Mhm.
always have a support network.
Yeah.
I had an issue. I was feeling a little bit down and beaten the other day, and I spoke to one of my friends who's been in a leadership position before, and she was able to say, do it this way, do it that way, and it was like, oh, okay, that's what I'm going to do then.
Yeah.
So I would really, 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 really encourage just collective unity, collective sharing of information, collective experience. Always have a network, a support network, because we often can't, when we're one of the first, or when we're alone in that role, or when we feel a little bit outnumbered, it is difficult.
Yeah.
So I would say that in terms of preparation.
Amazing. Yeah, I mean, I think, just from my personal experience, I founded the organization um, just over 3 years ago, almost 4 years ago now, and I think, I can totally, relate to, obviously it's a different context, but this feeling of, well, I haven't done a lot of the things that I'll need to do, but what's the issue with just going out and learning it as you go, and as you said, having mentors to help you along the way, I think has been so crucial for me as well in my
Don't get me.
experience.
I think there's nothing better than qualifications. That there's nothing better than actually learning, and knowledge is power.
Of
Knowledge
course.
is really important. So I'm not trying to skip over that at all.
No, of course.
In the context of black coaches, you know, one of the things that really annoys me is that there's this kind of narrative that, well, black coaches aren't getting jobs because they're just not good enough. That's a fundamental lie.
Sure.
Coaches are actually very qualified. They just haven't been given the opportunity. But equally, when they're given the opportunity, they need to be given the opportunity to fail and succeed.
Of course.
Because there's
Wonderful.
also this amount, and I feel it now in my role, that there's this pressure that you have to like fly the flag for millions of black people who aren't in the job, um, who aren't in your position. And as much as it's something that, I always want to be someone that opens the door, it's a lot of pressure. So it's being able to say to all the coaches on, you know, all the coaches listening, put yourself in a position to where you're qualified, where you're upskilled. Um, but when the opportunity comes, don't be afraid to you know, learn, make mistakes. And I think for those hiring, you gotta allow people to make mistakes
Yeah,
in the
100%.
same way other people make mistakes. That the margin for error, I think, is still a lot smaller for black coaches, which is why the black coaches that have actually made it into those roles um, don't get recycled as quickly.
Yeah, they
That,
don't.
oh, failed. He's not good. He's written off. It's like, well, no. Lots of coaches have failed in the past and been given another job. Um, so it's a combination of upskilling, you know, qualifications, but also putting yourself in the position. Apply for the job. You know, one thing that really upsets me is when I hear coaches, and I understand it because, you know, you can't really aspire to be something you can't see. But when I hear black coaches go, well, I just didn't apply because I'm never going to get it. Well, how are you going to know you're going to get it if you don't apply?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, no, I guess it goes back to that kind of intrinsic motivation that you were speaking about at the beginning. It's, you know, it's being able to say to motivate yourself to say, you know what, yeah, someone needs to do that if no one else has gone before me. But I think it's also so important what you're mentioning about allowing coaches, black women in executive roles to have an impact, you know, in the same way anyone would, and giving them a chance to just do the role, to learn, to as you said, make mistakes. I think, you know, if we think about it as a parallel in developing players, you
Hmm.
know, we need to allow players to make mistakes to learn.
Exactly. It's exactly the same. And don't get me wrong, you know, you know, at the highest level, you have to perform and you have to, you know, try as much as possible to be good at what you do, and to that you have objectives and all of that. But you know, there's no one on this earth that is perfect.
Hmm.
So people got to be allowed to fail and you know, make little failures, make little mistakes, and bounce back from that, and it makes them better for it. If you're just written off every time you make a mistake, you're never gonna get to where you're gonna get to.
Yeah,
Uh,
100%. I'd love to just ask in terms of, you know, we were speaking earlier about the creation of environments that are inclusive and that are conducive to allow that kind of development of coaches and players and you know, across the board for that matter. What for you creates that environment? What is there something that you sort of highlight on, you know, as a player when you were playing, or now as a leader, you know, from both ends of the spectrum, what creates a supportive environment that allows individuals to thrive?
when I think about Chelsea, um, Chelsea is my team, and you know, I played there for 6 years, and it's a club that's very close to my heart. We had players from South Korea, Sweden, Ireland, England, Japan, America, literally all over the world, and everybody felt like each of our experiences were heard and were like understood. Um, we would go out to, you know, we'd one day we'd go out to a South Korean restaurant of Ji So Yun, another day we'd go for a roast, an English another day we'd have Swedish coffee, and so there's something about really kind of genuinely wanting to understand cultures, different backgrounds, generally actually trying to experience it, that really sort of puts you in the shoes of that other person. Because again, going back to my point, you can have all the diversity in the world, but unless you actually understand how each how certain cultures work, how people think, you're not going to learn how to work with people. So I'll give you an example. You know, I can work with many different types of people, you know, white people, people from different languages, etc. But if they fundamentally still feel that if I send an email, it's aggressive because I'm a black woman, it's not an inclusive environment. It's a diverse environment, but it's
Sure.
an inclusive one.
Hmm.
So it's being able to say, what are you doing to actually like engage with that person's culture to make you like them more, understand them more? Oh, that's why they do what they do. That's why they say what they say. That's why being late is really rude to them. That's what, like, and I guess I'm just a curious person anyway, and I like to travel and I like to understand different cultures. But people don't do that enough.
Hmm.
People don't do like another example I'll give you. I was talking to a Japanese agent not long ago, and I knew that in Japan time is very important. I made sure that I was on the Zoom call 15 minutes early
Wow.
because in Japan it's rude if you're on time, rude.
Sure.
I know that because I had a Japanese teammate, however
Hmm.
many, that told me that.
Amazing.
Because I sat down and had a conversation with her about her culture. So again, we can work with diverse people, but the inclusivity part comes from actually, well, what are they about? Like,
Yeah.
speak to them, talk to them about their life,
Yeah. I
you
think
know?
such an important point and such an important tool for coaches of in any environment. I think one of the things that we tried to highlight about our methodology from sort of a really initial point is how important it is to get to know the context that you're working in
Hmm.
and context of your girls and of your players. And as you said, just have a genuine empathy towards everybody's experience.
That's the word, empathy. That's the
Mm.
word. It's empathy. Empathy is being able to put yourself, even if it's not your experience, being able to put yourself in the shoes of the other person.
Mm.
That's true inclusivity. Because it means that when something happens, or it means that when you have to work together and you may have a different idea or a different thought, you're able to understand why that thought comes from a different place versus judgment because you don't understand it.
That's wonderful and such an uplifting way to sort of start to close the conversation and such an important I think highlight of all this and all this conversation and how to take this movement to a next step and it's encourage empathy. I think we had a few questions that let's see if we can address some of these. So we've got from Tilly Robinson, how does the media affect people's perception of other cultures? Would you say it's getting better or worse?
Great question. That's a great question, Tilly. I think I think it's getting worse. I think we live in a very polarized world where actually division sells. I was reading yesterday that Meghan Markle was the most trolled woman in the world,
Hmm.
and she's not even on social media.
Wow.
She's not even on social, so you're not even actually atting her. People are talking
Yeah.
in a negative way because they're being fed negative perceptions of her constantly. So, which says to me that the media are feeding into a lot of the stereotypes that we are conditioned to think.
Hmm.
So, you know, I so all the things that are around, as I said earlier, around what people think about as a black woman in a leadership role, aggressive and angry, and media feeds into that, um, and which makes it harder to then reverse, right?
Of
Because
course.
it is super powerful. So it's a shame because I think in football in particular, Raheem Sterling did a great job of trying to identify that actually, no, the way the media write about certain people is different to how they write about others.
Sure.
But there's a trade-off, I think, now where there's a clickbait culture where it's like the most kind of sensationalist stories are the ones that sell, even if they're not true.
Yeah.
you know, so it feeds into those stereotypical ideas.
Yeah, 100%. I think, it couldn't be more on the ball. I mean, we definitely need to consider these going forward. And as you said, if we are being in a place where we're able to implement these trainings and all of this, it's something that we need to consider is how social media and the media now
Yeah,
play a
100,
role. Yeah.
100.
Let's see, we've got another one here. What advice would you give to someone who wants to work on being a good striker?
Um, I would say repetition is really important. So making sure you're constantly, you know, shooting at a target, hitting the target all the time. So when you get into that position in a game, it comes natural to you. There's some strikers that like are naturally gifted finishers that they can close their eyes and, you know, score. I wasn't necessarily one of them. I had to really work at my finishing to score goals. So I had to do a lot of repetition, a lot of sort of practicing, and so that when I was in the position, I felt comfortable. I think that's really important for a striker.
Wonderful. We had a question earlier about, when you were speaking about building that sort of internal motivation and being okay with opening those doors around whether you have any personal practices that you use to build that resilience or anything that you do yourself to get to know yourself better and be and kind of be working at that.
I switch off. I try to switch off from work mode.
Okay.
In this job, because I love football, the risk in this job is that I'm constantly working, even when I'm
Of course.
thinking about work all the time. So I really try to deliberately like put my work phone away, put my work laptop away, time with friends, spend time with family, travel as much as I can, although this year's been a nightmare. Um, yeah, I just try and delve into other interests that I have.
Mm,
Um,
so
but
valuable.
I think it's so important that we don't lose the things that really like we feel really happy about. Like, yeah, like do not compromise that. Whatever that might look for, maybe sitting in the park and just reading a book, like whatever gives you that sort of like moment of peace, like do not compromise that. It's really important.
Amazing, amazing. Yeah, I think that's advice that we all need, and particularly during this time, I think there's been a lot of conversations around it, but whether we're actually putting into action is another question. Turning off.
Mm.
So yeah, that's wonderful. I think there's an interesting one here about whether you have any inspirations to be a manager. Did you ever consider being a coach? Is that something that you ever played around with, or?
Not really, no. I think I knew that I wasn't gonna be, I don't think I'm patient enough to be a coach.
Okay.
And I think actually it's probably too close to playing. Uh,
Sure.
I think
Too
in the
close to being on the pitch, right? That sideline is not.
yeah, I think as a sporting director you can be a little bit removed. I don't pick the team. I don't do the, I still have an influence, but not at the grass as a sort of. I think
Yeah.
that I was lucky enough to play. I mean, I've probably played at the top level since I was 17, so it's intense for a long time. And I've sacrificed a lot, missed funerals, missed weddings, missed lots of family time, missed lots of friend time. So that I knew that when I was retiring, I wanted some semblance of a normal life back. I
Sure.
think as a coach, you need to still be kind of obsessed.
Of course.
So yeah, no, I don't think it's for me.
Fair. Yeah, no, that's it's very true. So I guess just to start closing up. I mean, thank you so much for your time and
You're welcome. Thank you.
for
Thank
this
you. Great
chat.
question. And
Super.
yeah,
Yeah, we're super excited to be able to. So we have a workshop coming up on Saturday. which is an intro to coaching workshop for anyone who is looking to get into coaching and wants to understand a little bit more what that's like, as part of our Black Coaches Matter campaign. And we're super excited because we're able to give out your book to everybody who participates in that.
Oh, sorry about that. Thank you.
Yeah, so that keep an eye out for that for everybody who's listening. And I guess just to close, it'd be great to hear just any kind of inspiring words, anything that that you could leave with us for our community, our Girls United community. Sometimes I like to frame it as what advice you'd give yourself, a younger Annie.
A younger,
Yeah.
yeah, I think I would advise a younger me to, to always remind myself that, you're enough, you're good enough, you've got the skills, you've got the talent. Don't let anybody kind of make you feel that you can't achieve what you want to achieve. Because that voice, when I was younger, that voice in my head was very loud of, oh, you're not able to do that, or that self-doubt. And I think for a lot of young women, it's quite loud voice as well. So we've got to be able to control that and really, give ourselves, back ourselves a lot more. I'll definitely say that the hard work, there's no way out of that. You've got to work hard, sometimes harder. That's the reality. And the support network. I would have loved this when I was a teenager.
Sure.
I would have loved to be able to jump on a live and see and just hear a conversation and take something from it. I think that's what's amazing now about social media. As much as there's lots of bad things about social media, the ability to connect and talk and understand what other people are experiencing, often it's similar to you. So find a network, back yourself, give yourself self-confidence, and work hard.
Amazing. Wonderful advice. Wonderful. I think for all the girls that we coach and that are part of our community, that's such a wonderful message to be able to convey to them. I hope they're all listening, everyone we coach.
Yes, I hope so.
If not, we'll make sure they do. So thank you so much again, Annie.
Thank
It's been
you.
a pleasure.
Thanks for all your comments, guys.
Yeah, thank you for everybody who's listening. Keep an eye out for posts about the book. We probably will have opportunities to do little giveaways for someone who asked earlier. So yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
Have a great evening over there. Yeah.
Enjoy the workshop.
Thanks. Yeah, we definitely will.
Take care.
Bye.